Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to tonight's full season preview for the 2023 Formula 1 season. Hope you're all doing well on what is obviously Tuesday night for me in the UK. And obviously no matter what time and part of the world, time zone and part of the world you are from, hope you're all having as best today as possible. And yeah, we've got plenty to be getting into this evening, where I'm going to be going through all the teams, all the drivers, and giving my absolute final predictions for how I think things are going to go in 2023. Some interesting predictions, I would say, from me in certain areas, as I'll get through during the course of the stream. And obviously we'll be going team by team, kind of like we did with the testing review a couple nights ago. But also we'll be getting into obviously what the calendar is for this season. I will get into my full Constructors' Championship and the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship predictions. But also I'll be getting into my predictions for who is going to win what race in 2023. And even show another, piece of data for this season that is very important to remember, which is the Aero testing table, I guess you could say, in terms of who is allowed to develop their cars in the wind tunnel because of the way the rules work now, more so than other teams. I do also want to make sure I show that later on in the stream, because it will, I think, give you guys a good helping for your own predictions for the season, because obviously, the way things start, pecking order-wise, it's not going to be that way at the end of the season. And a lot of that will be to do with how much teams can develop their cars. So, yeah, we will see. We will get to that later on in the stream. But, whilst I'm going along in tonight's stream, what I want to hear from you guys, most importantly, is, what are your final predictions for the season? Who do you think wins the Drivers' Championship? Who wins the Constructors' Championship? What is your top 5, top 10 for the Drivers' standings? What is your Constructors' standings prediction for 2023? And even if you want to, in the comments section down below or in the live chat, it's up to you. You can give me your predictions for all the race winners in 2023 in terms of who is going to win what, particular Grand Prix. I'll show that, of course, later on in the stream. And just let me know in general your final thoughts going into the season when it comes to every team and every driver, and just how you think things after testing, which has given us obviously a bit of a better idea as to what is going on. Give me, your final ideas of just what's going to happen in 2023. And of course, at the very end of the season, we'll see just how right or wrong we were. Obviously, we'll get to my predictions, sometime into the stream. But to be honest, I don't think my predictions are going to be that far off. And I'm not saying that because I'm super confident or arrogant of what I have predicted, but I think what I've predicted is, there's a good chance of it actually happening, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, we'll get into all of that stuff later in the stream. But what we are going to do before we get into the teams and how I think they will do in 2023, let's get into the calendar for the 2023 Formula 1 season. So, of course, we start this weekend in Bahrain, and then 2 weeks later on St. Patrick's weekend, we go to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And then at the very end of March / start of April, it's the Australian Grand Prix weekend. And then after that, we have quite a wait until the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So the season, despite it being the biggest and longest F1 calendar of all time, it's going to start off pretty slow in terms of, obviously, the races. Between now and the end of April, which is about 2 months, only 3 races, which doesn't sound great. But once we get to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, you can see from the end of April until the end of June, we get what? 1, 2, 3, about 6 races. So, just getting to Baku will be, I think, the aim for our excitement. Because once we get there, and then, motor on, no pun intended, through all of those races until the end of June, start of July, I think we'll be already pretty happy with, the type of races we've had to that point of the season. But I can see it getting, in terms of exciting this season, I can see it not, immediately out of the blocks, the 2023 season being really exciting, because again, we haven't got that many races to start the season. But yeah, Baku is on the last weekend of April. Then the first weekend of May, it is Miami. And then we have a triple header of Imola, Monaco, and Spain. Imola and Monaco, of course, in May, and Spain, the Spanish Grand Prix will be in the first weekend of June. And then you've got the Canadian Grand Prix in the middle of that month. And then pretty much at the very end of June, start of July, we have then the Austrian Grand Prix, race 10 of the season. And then race 11, a week after that, the British Grand Prix. And then the final 2 races before the summer break, Hungary and Belgium. I honestly cannot remember the last time the Belgian Grand Prix was not held in August. It's probably... The last time it was not held in August has to be... not just not held in August, but not even September. The last time it was held in neither of those months has to be back when we weren't even racing at Spa, when we were racing at Zolder, where, of course, sadly, Gilles Villeneuve, I think, lost his life at that particular track. And that was back in the early 1980s. So, yeah, it is weird to see the Belgian Grand Prix not in the month of August or even September. Very weird to see that. And then the first race after the summer break is the Dutch Grand Prix on a bank holiday weekend. And then the first weekend of September, it is the final European race, as normal, the Italian Grand Prix. Mid-September, it's then Singapore, and then a week after that, the Japanese Grand Prix. And then the Qatar Grand Prix makes its return to the calendar on the first weekend of October, I'm pretty sure. Yep. And then the US Grand Prix, a couple weeks after that. And then a week after that is the Mexican Grand Prix. And then, in what is the third part of a triple header, it is then the Sao Paulo Grand Prix officially, but of course being held in Brazil. Penultimate race is Las Vegas, of course, which the race itself will be held in Las Vegas on, is it Saturday night? I'm pretty sure, the Grand Prix. I can't remember. The timings for that Las Vegas Grand Prix are really weird. So I still need to go back and look at them to absolutely make sure. But the dates there are correct. It is the 16th to the 18th of November for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. And then a week after that, the final Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi. But, 23 races. Should have been 24 if the Chinese Grand Prix was not cancelled due to reasons of COVID. Still surprised that race wasn't replaced by Turkey or Portugal. I mean, in hindsight, probably was the best it wasn't replaced by Turkey. Not because the Grand Prix wouldn't have been able to go ahead, but because obviously the country of Turkey has much more important things going on since the earthquake. So, yeah, but I'm still surprised that that Grand Prix in China that was supposed to be smack bang in the middle of the Australian and Azerbaijan Grand Prix, I'm surprised it wasn't replaced by something in April. But, yep, they've decided to leave it open, which is a shame. But still, 23 races, and I cannot wait to get the season underway. And I think we'll just get now straight into it. And we'll start, of course, with the team that I think are going to be world champions in 2023. And that is, of course, the Red Bull racing team. And yeah, I think Red Bull are going to be champions. They've got clearly the best car on the grid. I know, certain people in the media are talking up Ferrari, say, for this weekend and even for the start of the season. That, Ferrari are going to be a lot more competitive than they showed in Bahrain in testing. Which I think, Ferrari will show a bit more pace. But I think Red Bull still absolutely have the best car. And I don't think Red Bull have a weakness when, of course, Ferrari and Mercedes definitely have weaknesses they need to work on. We've seen with Ferrari, the grip of their car isn't the best. There are some handling issues. Mercedes have had their own handling issues, and they are still lacking Mercedes as well in straight line speed. And as well, given that Ferrari don't tend, of course, to outdevelop Red Bull over the course of a season, and don't tend to develop their car well, period, over the course of a season, I don't see Ferrari catching up to Red Bull to the point where they are as quick as the Red Bull team. Ferrari, of course, are going to win races this season, but I just don't see anybody being able to stop Red Bull in 2023 from winning the championship. I just don't see anyone being able to stop them. Max Verstappen, I think, wins. I mean, as I'll show exactly with my predictions for the race winners in a few moments, I think Max wins probably around about the same amount of races that he won last year. Perez as well, I think, wins 2, maybe 3 or 4 races this season as well. Red Bull are going to win, I think, for sure, at least 15 of the 23 races. I think that's absolutely for sure. Their car has no weaknesses, and the only thing going against them is that because, of course, of the slight reduction of their aero testing time for this year because of the cost cap penalty and because they won the championship last year, that will play against them compared to, say, Mercedes, who I think will develop the best out of the top 3 teams from last season. They're not going to start, or they're not going to end this season, Red Bull, as quick as I think they're going to start the season. But by the time Mercedes, say, get their act together, which will be probably at the earliest right before the summer break on a consistent basis, I think Red Bull by that point would have already had the championship wrapped up. So yeah, Max Verstappen, I believe, wins his 3rd consecutive world championship. And where he wins it exactly, I don't know, but I could see him, to be honest, getting it wrapped up around Monza, Singapore time. I think he could absolutely get it wrapped up officially by then, because this car with him in it is going to be just an unbelievable force that the teams are going to have to try and put up a fight against. But I just don't see how, the other teams, other than the occasional race here and there, I just don't see how the other teams can put up a fight against the Red Bull team. I just don't see how it can happen. And I know people may say from testing, well, Perez was what, 0.7 of a second quicker than Ferrari with the best lap times on the same tyre. And, Ferrari have a bit to improve in terms of their single lap pace, and they definitely didn't show as much as Red Bull did on that final day. I think that's true, but I think what people are forgetting is it was Sergio Perez who did the best time for Red Bull in testing. When we know that this man on screen, Max Verstappen, could probably go 3-4 of a second quicker than Perez. So even if Ferrari do display a bit of an improvement from what they showed in testing compared to Red Bull and Mercedes over a single lap, it's not going to matter, because Max is still going to be 5, 6, 7 of a second clear, probably at best, for Ferrari, over them. So, yeah, I just don't see how Max Verstappen is stopped this season. I know people have, some people out there have asked the question, can Perez put up a fight against Max? Nope, I don't think he can. Perez will have the occasional race where he is not too far behind Max, and I think Perez, like I said, will win a couple races this season, but it's going to be a cakewalk for Max Verstappen. Even more of a cakewalk than it was last year. Last year, remember, Red Bull didn't always have the quickest car at every Grand Prix, and the only reason it was such a cakewalk is because Ferrari made so many mistakes and threw away so many points that Max, obviously built such a great gap because of that. This season, I mean, even if Ferrari or Mercedes don't make mistakes with their strategy and multiple other things, and they stay 100% reliable, they're still going to be, probably after, say, 10 races, quite far behind in the championship. So, yeah, Verstappen, like I've said, is going to win the championship. I think Sergio Perez will also have a very good season, and pretty much will be on par with what he did last year, which for the Red Bull team, I would say, is good enough. But let's quickly get into some stats regarding Red Bull and Max from last season. Because, of course, last year was a very good season for them. They won the Drivers' and Constructors' title and had 17 wins in 22 races. Only 8 pole positions. They're definitely going to improve on that 8 pole position, or on those 8 pole positions, that they had in 2022. They're probably going to have this season at minimum like 12, 13 at the absolute minimum, and that's being very kind to Ferrari, Mercedes, and possibly even Aston Martin. When it comes to the 17 race wins they had last year, I think they'll be right around that for this season, if not, say, 1 or 2 less or 1 or 2 more, give or take. Yeah, it's going to be statistically just as good, if not better, for Red Bull this season, which is, I mean, I don't mind who, of course, wins championships, but I do want, the championship to be fought over by, 2 different drivers, preferably different teams as well, like we had, of course, a couple of years ago in 2021. And it is a shame that I don't think we are going to get a title fight this season. I think it's going to be just very one-sided, really straight away. But that's the reality, I'm afraid. I'm not going to sit here and inhale not copium. I'm not going to sit here and inhale hopium and pretend as though there is a chance there'll be a title fight this season, because I'm telling you now, guys, there isn't going to be a title fight this season. I would be extremely surprised if there is an actual championship fight in 2023. I really, really would be. I think this could be similar for Red Bull. I mean, with last season, really their dominance in terms of the results shone through in the second half of the year. I think this season for Red Bull will be a lot more like, say, 2011, where they obviously had Sebastian Vettel as their number one, where that year they came straight out of the gates with the best car by a mile, and by race 6, race 8 of the season, they already pretty much had the championship wrapped up, drivers and constructor side. And I think it's going to be similar to that for Red Bull in 2023. And they are going to be, without a doubt, a very scary prospect this season. Let me know in the chat, though, guys, and the comments section. Do you agree or disagree? Do you think there will be a title fight this season? And if you do think there will be, please let me know why you think that, because I am very curious to hear anyone who, does think there is going to be a title fight, because I just don't see how it's possible. But anyway, let's go on to the Ferrari team, who had a not so bad pre-season testing, but I think there are some Ferrari fans out there currently that are definitely inhaling quite a bit of hopium going into the first Grand Prix and the season, really. I know, there's people saying that Ferrari, they've got more to show in comparison to the other teams than what they showed in testing, which I think is true. But I don't think Ferrari are going to all of a sudden be right on the pace of, say, Red Bull at the first Grand Prix. I don't see that happening. I don't see this absolutely ginormous, leap forward from what we saw in testing. I think there will be a leap forward. I don't think they're going to be slower than Mercedes, for example, in qualifying for the first few races of the season. I think Ferrari will excel in qualifying a lot more than they do on race day. But I think there are legitimate issues with the Ferrari car. The handling of the car is not, I think, where the drivers and the team where they want it to be. They may not say that, but I think if you look at how the car is handled so far, I definitely don't think it's where they want it to be. There is a bit of oversteer in this car in the faster corners. Also some talk of understeer that Charles Leclerc doesn't like in this car so far, which could explain maybe why he's been having, when I saw him on board on the Ferrari, it didn't seem as comfortable, the Ferrari car, in his hands compared to Sainz. And I think Carlos does like more so a car with more understeer than oversteer. So yeah, you've got those issues. And if you look at the long run data from not just day 3, which obviously I looked at on Sunday night from testing, the review of testing, not just on day 3, but really the whole test, Ferrari had very legitimate issues with tyre degradation on their long runs. Their lap times when they started out would be fine, but they would drop off quite badly after that. And if you go and look at the stints that everyone did, the long run stints, especially on the final day and a half, in terms of the drop off of lap time from the beginning of the stint to the end of the stint, Ferrari's drop off was one of the worst in the field that I saw. It was as bad, or around about as bad as like Haas, and even I think even to a certain extent the I think Williams team as well. I'm not saying Ferrari are going to have worse tyre deg than those teams and be slower, of course, but I think you get my point that, yeah, their tyre degradation on a long run is an issue as well. We saw that last season. They obviously they suffered quite heavily with that, and that's a big reason why in the second half of last season they won 0 races, because they just could not keep their tyres in good enough condition to consistently set good enough lap times to fight for the victory of a race. And Red Bull had, the better tyre deg and just better race pace in general. And yeah, that's why, Ferrari suffered in the second half of last season. And by the looks of it, for at least the first half of this season, that's going to continue. And probably, let's be honest, for the entire of this season. So if you are a Ferrari fan, say at least going into Bahrain, please do not be thinking that you're going to be on par with Red Bull, because I really don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think that's going to happen. Like I said, Ferrari this season, they are going to win races. I don't think they're going to be absolutely god-awful or anything, but they are not title contenders at all. They don't have the car, I'm afraid. They've got, the horsepower from the power unit. That's absolutely fine. Their pace will be at its best in comparison to Red Bull in qualifying. So if they are going to win races this season, qualifying is absolutely the key. But I just don't think they've got enough here at all to be title contenders. And I think anyone even predicting that, again, is really hoping more so than actually knowing or trusting in what they've seen so far, or maybe they just haven't seen much of, the Ferrari car so far this season, obviously from testing. So yeah, I think Ferrari statistically will have a similar season to last year. They won't start the season as well as they started last season, but I think statistically it will be a similar season for them. 2 or 3 race wins. I think last year they had 4, but around about that number. I think at best it'll be for the Ferrari team. Of course, they'll have a few podiums. How many pole positions? I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 during the season. Maybe I'm underselling that. But yeah, I just don't see a title contention from this team. I don't see that at all. And when it comes to the drivers, I think it will be clearly Charles Leclerc as the number 1 at this team. Carlos Sainz, yes, he did end last season better than he started 2023, but I don't think he'll continue that coming into this season. And I think Charles Leclerc will prove that he is clearly better than Carlos Sainz, and Sainz will be firmly the number 2 driver at this team. And I don't believe as well that Sainz will win a race this season, like he did, of course, last year at the British Grand Prix, in what was a classic Grand Prix. But yeah, if you're a Ferrari fan, just don't go into this season expecting too much, because I don't think that much, really compared to last year is possible for them. But we'll get into some stats regarding their previous season. And yeah, last year, 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, and 2nd for Leclerc just about as well. Obviously earned that just about in the final race over Sergio Perez. It was 4 race wins for Ferrari in 2022. They'll probably do well to end up with another 4 race wins this year, or any more than that, I've got to be honest. And yeah, 12 pole positions they had in 2022. They are not going to be anywhere near that number in 2023. They'll probably be about 10 less than that, say on like 2, maybe 3 pole positions for the season. And I think as well with Ferrari, as I said a few days ago during my testing watch-alongs, and I think some of you will absolutely agree, this season, because they've got a new team principal and they've reshuffled some of the key personnel around in the team, I think this year is a bit more of a restructuring and rebuilding year than it is a, we're going to fight for the championship type season. So yeah, if you're a Ferrari fan, don't go into the season with too high expectation. And I think 2024 is more likely to be a season where Ferrari contend for the championship than this season, I've got to be honest. But we'll move on now from them, and we will go on to the Mercedes-Benz team. Let's go on to them now. And their testing program was... It's hard to say how it was... It's hard to describe it in the best way, I guess you could say, with them, because... day 1 was really good. They didn't have any porpoising issues that we saw last season. The handling of the car looked good. Mercedes sounded pretty happy with the pace as well, out of the blocks. And then obviously day 2, reliability issues and handling issues. Some more handling issues on day 3, but then they seem to have improved on that and then showed a lot more pace. They do also have an upgrade coming to the Bahrain Grand Prix this weekend, which is a new, slimmer rear wing to help with the straight line speed. But, yeah, obviously coming into this season, I believed that Mercedes were going to be contending for the championship. And I thought they would be, compared to Red Bull, a lot closer than they actually are. But the sad fact is, they are not close enough to Red Bull to win the championship. They're just not. Even if they bring what is rumoured that they might be doing in a few races, even if they bring basically a B car with a new side pod concept that's a bit more akin to the Red Bull, and that really cuts down a lot of the lap time they'll be losing to Red Bull at the start of this season. Even if that happens, they will already have given up a lot of ground to Red Bull in the championship. And then at that point, they need to obviously hope that they can start clawing away at the lead that Max and Red Bull have over them, which I don't think realistically is going to happen, given how big the gap I think is between Red Bull and Mercedes at this point of the season. And I think in terms of race wins, for the Mercedes team in 2023. I don't think they'll be as possible in the first half of the season as they will be in the second half of the season. I think in the second half of the season, you'll see Mercedes certainly fighting for victories more than you'll see in the first half of the season. As I'll show you soon enough with my who is going to win what race prediction, I think Mercedes will win a race in the first half of the season, but I don't think they'll be able to fight, like I said, for victory as much in the first half of the season as they will be, say, after the summer break. And obviously by that point, it'll be way too late. And if, at the end of the day, this new B car or new or alternative concept that they've got in the wind tunnel currently, if they do bring it to the track and it is miles quicker and puts them a lot closer to Red Bull, not as quick as Red Bull, but a lot closer to them, then at the end of the day, I think, it's all down to Mercedes in terms of who is at fault for why Mercedes aren't at that championship contending level in 2023, because they insisted for the start of this season on keeping this design philosophy, concept, whatever you want to call it, that, of course, didn't do them that well last year. And yeah, they'll have to take the responsibility for that if that new concept that is, more like the Red Bull, if it is much, much better, they're going to have to take really full responsibility for not producing the goods for their drivers, who I'm sure will be pretty disappointed. Happy but disappointed that they didn't start the season with that other concept of car, if indeed Mercedes do bring it to the circuit. But yeah, I think first half of the season, I think they'll be, getting podiums. I think they'll get a win before, say, the British Grand Prix. Second half of the season, they'll improve. Obviously, they've got a bit more wind tunnel testing, aero testing time this season than Red Bull and Ferrari do. So they should develop the best out of those top three teams. And yes, second half of the season is I think is where they will come or get to their best. But in terms of the championship, it's going to be way too late. And I think I think if you ask any of the F1 journalists that have been to testing and obviously are in Bahrain still for the first Grand Prix, I think they'll even tell you that Mercedes have already given up way too much ground to Red Bull at the start of this season for them to be even considered as title contenders. So, yeah, it's sad to say because I really wanted us to get Max versus Lewis, part 2 after what was an amazing 2021 fight. It's just not possible. It's not possible this season, I'm afraid. For Lewis Hamilton, he'll have a better season. I think he'll finish ahead of George Russell in the championship, and I think he will also do better than he did compared to Russell in the qualifying head-to-head, and just in general have a better season. Russell will still have a good season himself. I think Russell will win another Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton, though, I think probably wins more races than Russell does this season. And I guess the only other thing to say is that I hope they end the season a lot closer to Red Bull than they're going to start this season, because then at least it could give us a very small amount of hope going into 2024 that there is a possibility of Mercedes doing something against Red Bull. But in terms of the top three teams from what we saw last season, I'll be honest, I don't see a massive change with these top three teams, or these three teams in particular, going forward until the end of 2025, when this set of regulations will, come to an end and we'll have a new set of regulations, obviously, in 2026. Red Bull, I think, are destined to be the dominant best team for this season, next season, and probably 2025. I don't see them, turning up to next year or the year after and getting it wrong with their car design. I think they'll just continue to improve what is already a magnificent machine. Mercedes, obviously, will continue playing catch-up, and I think Ferrari are, like I said, in a bit of a rebuild, and, are trying to focus on that. And obviously that rebuild is going to be very important to whether Ferrari win titles in a few years' time as opposed to this season. So, yeah. In terms of who wins the championship for the next 3 seasons, I don't think it's going to be a massive shock, I guess you could say. But yeah, with Mercedes, it will be better than last season for them, statistically, and we'll go into their stats from last season. So, of course, in the Constructors' Championship, they were 3rd. Hamilton in the Drivers' Standings was 6th. And the team had 1 race win and just 1 pole position in 2022. Yeah, their stats will be better this season. They'll win more races. They might get more pole positions. Hamilton will finish higher in the driver's standings than he did last season. But yeah, it's not going to be enough of an improvement, I think, really, for Mercedes fans to be happy about this season, which is a shame. But like I said, I just think that's the sad reality, is that Red Bull have got by far the best car, and they are the team to beat by a country mile. And finally, before we, I think, pause for a bit, I want to go on to a 4th team who I think are a part of what I think now is not the top 3, I think is now the top 4 top teams in F1. And let's go on to them now. And that is, of course, the team, the Silverstone-based team, Aston Martin. And what a pre-season testing they have had. We, I think, had pretty good hopes for them coming into this season, given the improvements they made during the course of last season. Of course, Dan Fallows, who used to work at Red Bull, this is his first car, the 2023 car that he's been able to fully design. And Aston Martin, they're in such a better place than they were when they were Racing Point in terms of their finances and resources. Things are looking great at Aston Martin. So we knew there was going to be, a big improvement, or at least we expected one. But I don't think anybody expected as big of an improvement as we have seen already in 2023. And Aston Martin, I think, are the dark horse, without doubt, of 2023. They are the team that, if there's going to be a team that causes real surprise this season, it's going to be them. They really could break into the top 3 of the championship this season. I think it is legitimately possible. I will get to those reasons a bit more when we look at the Aero testing table in terms of who will have more time in the wind tunnel allowed compared to others this season, because I think that's a big factor as to why Aston Martin could legitimately finish in the top 3 of the championship. But yeah, their car looks overall brilliant. Fernando Alonso seems very confident. If you look at the long run data from the final day of testing, Fernando was going as quickly, if not quicker, on the same tyre than Ferrari and even Mercedes were. And Alonso, even this weekend, could very well be on the podium for the Aston Martin team. That's how good the pace has looked from them. Of course, we'll find out more from Friday practice. As you can see on your screen, practice 1 in Bahrain, only 3 days away. Cannot wait to see a bit more data from these cars. So yeah, there is definitely excitement around this team. A lot of excitement around this team. And I think, I wouldn't say the sky is the limit with them, obviously, because I think Red Bull are absolutely going to win the championship. But I don't think they came into this season quite expecting this. I think they came into this season expecting and hoping they would probably be fighting at worst with Alpine for 4th in the championship. I don't think they would have come into this season expecting to be fighting with Ferrari and Mercedes. I think if you ask anyone at Aston Martin right now, did you expect this to happen? I think they would have said absolutely no chance did I think when we started building this car that we were going to be in this type of position. So yeah, a lot of excitement around this team, and they are without a doubt the dark horse in 2023. The only issues with Aston Martin, I think, for this season will be three things. They're not all big reasons, but the only three issues I think I can think of for them this season that might prevent them realizing their full potential of these. Number one, they don't have the driver lineup, I think, with Alonso and Stroll that can consistently compete with Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari. Because obviously Fernando Alonso, he's right up there with those top drivers. There's no doubt about that. But Lance Stroll is, he's a good driver. I definitely like him as a driver a lot more than I used to, but he is not as good as Carlos Sainz or Sergio Perez and George Russell, never mind Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen, and of course his teammate Fernando Alonso. And I think Stroll, who of course may or may not race this weekend because of his wrist problem after a cycling accident. Thankfully, just an update on Stroll, he has been released from hospital, and he will, or I think he is currently back at Silverstone at the Aston Martin base, I think in the simulator, to see whether he can cope with driving the car this weekend. We'll see, of course, probably tomorrow or Thursday morning, whether he can actually, or whether, we'll see announcement-wise whether he is absolutely going to be on the car for this weekend's Bahrain Grand Prix. If not, Aston Martin have confirmed it will be Felipe Drugovich. But, once Stroll gets into the car, I just don't think he will be consistently competitive enough to see Aston Martin realise their absolute full potential. So I think Aston Martin are really this season going to be relying on Fernando Alonso and what he does as to where they finish exactly in the Constructors' Championship. The other couple reasons with Aston Martin is, as I'll get into in a moment, they do have more aero testing time in the wind tunnel allowed than the top three teams from last season, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. The only issue is that won't really start to take effect in a positive way for them until probably after the summer break. So they need to make sure, Aston Martin, that between now and the summer break, they get their upgrades absolutely bang on, and that they don't, put upgrades onto the car that don't work and don't improve the pace of their car, because if they do, then they might start to get left behind a bit, which obviously we wouldn't want to see from them. So yeah, that is a possibility. I mean, even if that did happen, they will then, bring an extra couple of upgrades this season that Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull can't. And that will allow them to then close the gap back up again a bit. But if they really want to break into the top three of the championship, they need to at least keep up with what Ferrari and Mercedes, for sure, what their development is like and how much they're improving their cars in the first half of the season, to have that really great chance of finishing higher than fourth in the championship in 2023. And the third reason, which is kind of a small reason, and we don't know the full... what's the best way to describe this? We don't know for sure whether this is a massive issue for them. But you may remember last year, Aston Martin, and this was the case for Mercedes-powered teams in general, but Aston Martin especially had really bad straight line speed compared to Ferrari-powered teams, Alpine even, and obviously Red Bull, Williams, and they were normally a lot of the time at the bottom of the timesheets. Now maybe that was because the Aston Martin car design was a bit too draggy last year, but of course with the Mercedes power unit still in the car, and we know it is still probably the weakest out of the 4 power units being used on the grid. That is going to be a weakness for them, and it will be this weekend. And it'll be interesting to see if they still have a really great performance, just how much it is affecting them. Because, let's say this weekend, if they show really great, speed on the long run, but then in qualifying, they're quite a bit slower. I think the reason that probably will be is because straight line speed and speed, especially in the DRS zones, it's most important in qualifying, because in the race, you're not using full power. And that's why the grip and handling of your car is a lot more important in the race than it is in qualifying. So I think in qualifying this season, that might just be an issue for them. And maybe a lot of the time, if they do have really good race pace, they might not be able to fully capitalize on that because of what could be a lack of qualifying pace in 2023. We'll see, of course, this weekend whether that is the case. I really hope it isn't, because I have big hopes for this team. But yeah, it's not going to be a perfect season for them. There's still some issues they'll need to combat if they're going to have a really mega season. But yeah, I think this is the team really to get the most excited about in 2023. Obviously, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, they will give us excitement this season. Red Bull are not going to win every single Grand Prix. So, there will be some races where it is really exciting. We get a great fight for victory, stuff like that. But I really think, if Alonso, for example, if he can either finish on the podium or, finish just off the podium, but have the pace absolutely to have been on the podium, then I think it really sets us up for what is going to be a great fight, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th in the championship. And that's what I'm really hoping for in 2023. Now, before I come on to your comments, guys, in the live chat, great to see some of you in the chat. And hello to all of you. Hope you're all doing well. There's a couple things I want to get into before I come to your comments there. First thing is my predictions in terms of the race winners in 2023. And what I'm going to be going through here, similar to what I showed with the F1 calendar for the year, I'm going to be going through every single Grand Prix and who I think wins all of the Grand Prix this season. If you want to predict, who you think wins all the Grand Prix this season, or just selected Grand Prix this season, again, let me know in the comment section or live chat. I don't mind. But let me get into my predictions. So for the first 10 races, this is who I think wins what race. So this weekend, I think Verstappen wins, and he also wins for me in Saudi Arabia and Australia. Reminder that any driver that's won the first 3 races of a season has gone on, I think, 100% of the time to win the championship. And I think Verstappen has a very, very, very good chance of doing that this season. Azerbaijan, I think Sergio Perez wins there. We all know how great he is in Baku. Miami, I'm going for Leclerc to win there. I think Miami, we're going to get probably a bit of a crazy race. We did have a bit of a crazy end to that race last year, and I think the grip of that track still won't be too great. There is a possibility there for some craziness. And obviously, rain is a possibility in Miami because, there is the possibility of a massive downpour of rain, which is something that does happen in that part of America, randomly out of nowhere. So I think, that weekend, I think we get a bit of a mental weekend with Charles Leclerc winning for Ferrari. And then at Imola, Max Verstappen, I think, wins there. Monaco, I'm going George Russell to win the Monaco Grand Prix. That's Mercedes' first win of the season, I believe. And then in Spain, Canada, and Austria, Max Verstappen wins all 3 of those. and also wins the British Grand Prix and Hungarian Grand Prix. So that would be a run of 5 wins in a row, which I think definitely Verstappen will be doing at least that this season. And then the final race before the summer break, which is the Belgian Grand Prix, I think Charles Leclerc will win there. And then right after the summer break, obviously the Dutch Grand Prix, I think Max wins that because obviously it's his home Grand Prix, and I don't think he's gonna not deliver for his fans that weekend. Italian Grand Prix, I've gone for Perez. Singapore Grand Prix, that is the first of Lewis Hamilton's 2 victories that I think he'll be having in 2023. Japan, Max Verstappen, and then Qatar, Lewis Hamilton wins again. You remember how great he was that weekend at the Qatar Grand Prix in 2021. I think he'll replicate that again. And by that point in the season, early October, I think the Mercedes car will be good enough to start competing for victories. Maybe not every weekend, but some weekends here or there. US Grand Prix then, I think Verstappen wins, and wins, of course, in Mexico. And then Brazil, I'm going to go Charles Leclerc to win that one. And then Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi, the final 2 races of the season, I am going Max Verstappen to win those 2. So I think overall I've predicted Max to win 15 races, Perez to win 2. That'd be the same amount of wins for Red Bull in 2023. Leclerc to win 3, and obviously Sainz, I don't have winning a race this season, so that's 3 wins for Ferrari. And then 2 wins for Hamilton, 1 for Russell, so that's 3 wins for Mercedes. Obviously, the one person I've left off this list that could probably cause a surprise in terms of winning a race is Fernando Alonso. I think it's really too early to sit here and say that Alonso is going to win a race in 2023. I think a podium, yeah, absolutely. I think that could happen, but winning a race, I don't think we should go that far just yet. And at this point, I just don't know enough as to whether that is actually possible. So yeah, that's why I've gone for those as my race winners this season. And one more thing I want to show you guys before I move on to your comments in the chat is the Aero testing table. So what this is who gets to test or do wind tunnel testing with their car more so than other teams in 2023. Now, of course, the order is the order of last year's Constructors' Championship, and the percentage you can see there on the right-hand side is the percentage of wind tunnel time that each team is allowed compared to the, I think, base rate of wind tunnel aero testing that the FIA have set for 2023, which is 320 wind tunnel sessions or simulator runs. I can't remember exactly the wording, but I know it's 320 runs that the teams are allowed, and that is the 100% figure that the FIA have confirmed for 2023. And obviously you can see there Aston Martin in 7th, 100%. So they will have 320 runs in the wind tunnel. Let me just see if I can get it up quickly. The Darth Lord Raven asks, by the way, sprint races included? Nope, not in that race win prediction thing. I'm not including sprint races because, of course, it's more like a qualifying thing. But what do you call it? Let me just quickly get it up. So, I have to open incognito tab, I think, to view this from Autosport, because it's behind a paywall. So let me just quickly look. So yeah, so the base figures supplied allow a team, this is from the Autosport article, which is talking about everything we know about the 2023 season. The base figures supplied allow a team within one aerodynamic testing period, of which there are 6 in a season, 320 wind tunnel runs. So, Aston Martin at 100% are allowed 320 wind tunnel runs, but Red Bull at 63% are only allowed just over 200 runs in the wind tunnel. So, an extra, 120 runs in the wind tunnel? That is a lot extra time in the wind tunnel to have. And, when you compare that to, Ferrari, who have 240 wind tunnel runs, and Mercedes will have 256, that's quite a lot more that Aston Martin will have in 2023. And if they can, like I said, if they can really keep up with Ferrari and Mercedes development-wise in the first half of the season, there's no reason why they can't be thinking to overtake Ferrari and Mercedes pace-wise and possibly in the championship in the second half of the season. It is absolutely a possibility, but only if they start the season as quick as we think they're going to be. So I just need to make that clear. But yeah, you can see their Ferrari, 12% more wind tunnel time they'll have. Mercedes have an extra 17% compared to Red Bull. Alpine, they'll be, not the 4th best team, I don't think, in 2023, but they've got a decent amount of wind tunnel time to at least close the gap to Red Bull over the course of the season, but they're not obviously going to close it to the point where they're actually fighting with them. McLaren, though, they are going to suffer the most this season. And this is one thing I've noticed with this sliding scale thing that that Liberty Media brought in, I think, since 2021, is that if you finish well or well-ish the previous season, like McLaren did, still top 5 in the championship, it's not terrible. If you then turn up at the start of the following season with a car that's really bad, like McLaren have, you then don't have the extra time in the wind tunnel compared to other teams to, in the second half of the season, then get quicker and get it right. Which is why McLaren really have to start this season well, or else they're fucked. Because Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, Haas, AlphaTauri, Williams will have more time to develop their cars than McLaren. So yeah, that's a big issue for McLaren. And really going forward, like I said, if a team finishes in the top 5 of the championship this season and then starts off next season like way slower and horribly slow compared to the previous year, you just won't have that time in the wind tunnel to really correct it during the season. Maybe you will in the first half of the season, but after that, you can't really do that much more. So for a team like McLaren, if they can't really improve their car by mid-season, they're going to have to just give up on this year's car and focus on next year's car, because teams like Alfa Romeo and Haas, I think quite legitimately, could outdevelop them. I mean, obviously, for as much time as you're in the wind tunnel this season, it doesn't mean every upgrade you develop out of those runs is going to work. Not every upgrade that goes onto your car does make your car quicker, but let's assume it does for every team in 2023, then yeah, for McLaren, it's going to be a bad season for them because of how much worse off they are at the start of this year compared to last season. But also, it will be great for Aston Martin because, yeah, they've got quite a bit extra time to develop this season that could really help them possibly break into the top 3 of the championship. So, yeah, this will be very interesting to see what happens there. But I think I'll go back to some pictures here. There you go. So, for the next few minutes, I'm going to come to you guys in the chat to see what you guys have to say. And I want to hear predictions from you guys in chat. Who do you think wins the championship on the constructors and drivers side? How do you think Mercedes and Ferrari get on in 2023? And with Aston Martin, do you think they're as big of a dark horse as I think they are? And could they legitimately, in a similar way to Racing Point in 2020, who of course are the same team that Aston Martin are now, could they be the real surprise of the season and do some pretty nutty things in 2023, especially with Fernando Alonso at the wheel? Let me know in the live chat and the comments section as well. Just want to say quickly, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because we have got plenty of content coming your way for the rest of this week. Obviously, later this week is the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend, and I'll be doing a weekend preview on Thursday, practice 2 watch along and qualifying preview on Friday, and then on Saturday practice 3 watch along and qualifying watch along, and even a Formula 2 sprint race watch along as well. And then on Sunday, of course, will be the race watch along. So if you want to keep absolutely up to date with everything going on during the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend, then make sure to subscribe, because like I said, I've got plenty to keep you updated with as we go along. And just quickly, I might as well get to it now. Here are the next 2 pieces of content coming your way. So yeah, Thursday night, 8 p.m. UK time, I'll be live with the weekend preview for the Bahrain Grand Prix. And then at 2:45 p.m. UK time, the day after on Friday, I will be doing a practice 2 watch along. So yeah, make sure to come along to those 2 streams and all the other streams that I just mentioned that I'm going to be doing during the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. And another reminder is that on my community tab tomorrow, there'll be a post going out which will lay out the exact streams that I'm doing during the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend, and it will lay out as well the timings of my streams and just how everything schedule-wise is going to be going. So just letting you guys know about that. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash that like button. But yeah, let's get to some comments here. Let me quickly go through this this super chat. It's from Darth Lord Raven for €2. Thank you very much for that. It says, cheers, mate. Thanks for the stream and honest opinion. No problem. And thank you very much for tuning in. And hello to all of you in the chat. Eric says, will Red Bull be on the podium as often as last year, which was all but 2 races? Possibly. Yeah. I think it's absolutely possible, but I think it's a lot harder to predict something like that. But yeah, it's definitely a possibility. D'Angelo Williams says, this reminds me of the 2019 season, lol, but I think Mercedes will start 4th fastest team and finish in 2nd. They have a strong fundamental base now, which will allow them to develop massively. Yeah. I don't think Mercedes are that slow to start the season. I think they're, I'd say 3rd, most likely, and possibly 2nd or 3rd in race pace terms for the first Grand Prix. Because like I said, I think Ferrari have got big issues with that tyre degradation on the long runs that they are, trying not to mention, because I think they know that it's a big issue. But yeah, I think during the season, Mercedes will develop well. There's no doubt about that. But I just think for them, sadly, by that point, the championship will be long gone for them. But if they can, like they did last season, really gain a massive amount of lap time during the season, and there's no doubt last year they gained a lot of time with their developments, then that will be, I think, a really big positive. Aline says no fight until Barcelona. I mean, obviously with my predictions there, I showed that I think Leclerc and Russell will win races or win a race before the Spanish Grand Prix, but I think that is sadly possible. I think there is a chance that Red Bull could win the first 7, 8, 9 races. I think that is absolutely a possibility. Snow Lion says there's more hope for non-Red Bull fans this year, in my opinion. Depends who you're talking about. Yeah, it depends who you're talking about there, I think. Darth Lord Raven, Aston Martin looks pretty strong. Yeah, I think they do. And also says 12 poles is pretty much theoretically good. If they don't mess up their races, maybe we can have a good battle with Red Bull. I really hope they can, but like I said, I just don't think Ferrari have got the car in comparison to Red Bull that they had at the start of last season. D'Angelo Williams says Mercedes testing was amazing, to be honest, because the 2022 testing was horrendous. Them having a strong base to work on is significant to develop their car. You need a foundation to build a strong house. Yeah, they've got more of a foundation at the start of this season, which is why statistically this season will be better for them. But because of what they've had, obviously, success-wise in the last 10 years, you know, anything worse than winning the championship for them is failure, which, you know, may be harsh from the outside, but that's what it's like on the inside of from a mental side, an elite team. D'Angelo Williams also saying 2024 is where I expect Mercedes to be at their best. Do the basics and you'll get 95% of the result. Rome isn't built in one day, and Mercedes concept needs time. I would hold off on that in terms of saying the concept needs time, because it sounds like they could be moving to alternative concept. And I mean, yeah, if they were to bring that alternative concept and that was quicker but still not quite what they need, then yeah, you need time to work on these things. But I just think the reason they really needed to get it right this season is because I think if you allow Red Bull, which is going to happen, to become now very comfortable with what they've got and just simply, you know, develop the car in a pretty simple way going forward, what is already a magnificent machine, the Red Bull car, for next season and the year after. I think Red Bull at that point would just come... yeah, I think they just become way too strong. And I think at that point then Mercedes would have to really pull off or design something quite amazing to climb up to their level. So, yeah, I think if Red Bull, you know, if they do this weekend have truly the car I think they have, and it is miles quicker than everybody else, and they do win another 17 races this season, I don't see next season or the year after them, you know, dropping the ball. I just don't see it at all. I think, you know, maybe Mercedes and Ferrari will get closer to them, but overall, result-wise in the championships, I don't think they drop the ball going forward now for, you know, the next 2-3 years. Don't they have a second car lurking in the background? Snow asks Snow Lion. Yeah, they do, but I don't think an absolute decision has been made yet as to what they're going to be doing with that car. I think a lot depends really on this weekend's race. If their performance this weekend is really encouraging, then maybe they'll stick with it, but if they are like, you know, a second a lap off the pace at the absolute best of Red Bull, I think they probably bring that new B car at like race 4, 5, 6 of the season. Snowline says, also just my opinion, but I think Hamilton ought to have quit after the 2021 season to save face. Music Monster Man says, lol, dude, you always speak in such definitive terms. There's no way you can be sure before the first race has even commenced. The Mercedes have no hope of fighting for the championship. I mean, yeah, we don't know 100% for sure, because we haven't seen qualifying in the race yet. But I don't know, 99.9% sure. I think really, if you ask, again, all of the journalists who are a lot closer to Formula One than I am, who talk to people at the teams and have probably a better idea of what's going on, I think they would probably agree that it's going to be almost impossible for Mercedes to win the championship this season. So I don't think I'm, saying anything crazy. And I think I think I'll be proven absolutely correct after probably 2 or 3 races that Mercedes cannot win the championship this season. So yeah, I don't think what I'm saying is, blasphemous or anything. Elaine, how do you think Haas will perform? I'll get onto that in a second, because obviously we're going to go onto the midfield team soon. And then once I complete the midfield teams, I'm then going to go into my predictions, my final predictions for the Drivers and Constructors Championship. So, yeah, that will be coming in later in this stream. McLaren from races. The first race of the season will make up for having to come back from holiday in Manila. I have a new favourite beer. Red Horse gives you wings. Darth Lord Raven says, I think I have a gut feeling that Aston Martin will perform better than Mercedes. I know, I think Ted Kravitz thinks that Aston Martin at the minute are ahead of Mercedes. But again, Mercedes do have a new rear wing coming in this weekend's race to cut some drag off. And I think during testing, Mercedes did run with a higher downforce rear wing. Also important to remember, Ferrari ran with a two lower downforce rear wing. Because normally the rear wing you would run around Bahrain would be medium downforce rear wing. And I think Ferrari didn't have quite enough downforce on their rear wing. So, yeah, Ferrari will probably be better with their showing this weekend. But like I said, I don't think it's going to be anything amazing. Certainly not as good as last season at the same track. Darth Lord Raven says, Red Bull doesn't have any oversteer anymore. It's exceptionally really fast. Yeah, we saw the handling of the car during testing. Front end is bang on. Rear end is just perfect. You got to assume that they've still got a lot of straight line speed, which we saw last season. And yeah, it really looks like they've got, again, another superb machine for the season. But I think I'm going to move on to the rest of the teams. Actually, before I do, let me just go back onto Aston Martin, because there is something I wanted to show, just so you guys can remember, obviously, going into the season. So these obviously are Aston Martin's results from last season. 7th in the Constructors. Alonso obviously was 9th in the driver's standings, but he was driving for Alpine, who finished in 4th. They had only 3 top 6 finishes in 2022 and had quite an impressive 18 points finishes, despite being 7th in the championship, which I think is more points finishes than Alfa Romeo had, who they finished just behind. But yeah, they are going to do a lot better than that in 2023, and they're going to be the team who improves quite clearly the most out of any other. But I think now we'll go on to more so the midfield teams and start with Alpine, who are, one big mystery going into the season. They didn't really show us anything. They did, for each team, the slowest time in testing, but it was done on the C3 compound, which, it's a soft compound tyre this weekend, but it was a harder compound than really everyone else used, except for McLaren. And yeah, we just don't really know what they've got here. I think Alpine have also not really done as many laps as they could have to maybe save on, overstressing the power unit. But they seem confident in what they've got. I think they've got an upgrade coming for this weekend's race as well. And the feeling is that Alpine are probably, after the top 4 teams, best of the rest. Not massively best of the rest, but nonetheless best of the rest. And that's what I think they will be in 2023. Obviously, they would love to finish 4th in the championship for a second consecutive season, but I think given Aston Martin's improvement, I don't think that is realistically possible, I'm afraid. And I think, 5th place would be a good season. And if they can, maybe close the gap a bit to the top 3 teams by 2 or 3 tenths of a second over the course of the season, that would be great as well. But yeah, I'm not expecting, like I said, that much from Alpine in 2023. Just all I'm expecting really is just solid points finishes from both Ocon and Gasly, which will be a close fight. In qualifying especially, I think it'll be a close fight between Esteban and Pierre. But in the races, I think Esteban will be coming out on top because I think Esteban is definitely a better race driver. And I think Esteban overall is the better driver in this team lineup. So yeah, Esteban Ocon I think is probably the number 1 at what do you call it? At Alpine. Not in a sense that he is, the more favoured driver, but I think he is the best driver at this team. But as long as they consistently score points, it doesn't have to be, 7th and 6th place type finishes. As long as they, can get one car consistently into the points, say 80% of the time, and then have the second car in the points, say half the time, then that should be enough to beat all the cars and teams behind them. Because I think teams like McLaren, Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, they'll have their points finishes during the season, but they won't be able to do it on a consistent basis, which I think is what separates Alpine from them this season. But we'll get into some stats regarding them from last season. So yeah, 4th in the championship they were in the Constructors. Ocon obviously beat Alonso in the driver's standings and finished in P8. We have to remember, of course, Alonso had a lot more bad luck than Esteban in 2022. But it was still a great season from the Frenchman. They had 9 top 6 finishes in 2022. Going to be pretty hard to replicate that because obviously they're missing Fernando Alonso. And they had 30 points finishes. If they can have that this season, then of course they will finish at worst in 5th place. But I think more likely they'll have between 15 and 20 at the absolute best points finishes in 2023. And we'll now, I think, get into the team that is, going to be the most disappointing team by far of the 2023 season. And that, of course, is McLaren. Yeah, they have got a really bad car. From what I've heard, the handling of the car is not great. Oscar Piastri, I remember having a pretty bad snap of oversteer going into turn 10 and then having a full-on spin. The drivers really visually don't seem to be that happy with what they've got. Gotta say, McLaren didn't really show a ton of what they did truly have in testing, so maybe they've got a lot more than what they have shown, but yeah, I really don't think there's anything good here, or anything good enough to see them being a top 5 team in the championship. I really don't think that's going to be happening in 2023. I mean, the only positive I can say And one positive that was said, I think, by Lando Norris, I think, was it today or yesterday, that, testing this year has gone a lot better than it was last year. But even testing this year was pretty bad. McLaren couldn't really do any long runs because they had to keep re-strengthening the winglets on the front end every so often. So they couldn't really do like a full-on race stint like Aston Martin, Williams, AlphaTauri, Haas did, say, on the final day of testing. But yeah, it doesn't look good at McLaren. And everything we're hearing out of them doesn't sound good. They've talked themselves down so much. I don't think this is a case of McLaren playing 4D chess and actually their hand is brilliant compared to everyone else's. I don't think that is the case. I think they legitimately have a car that is not much of an improvement on what we saw last season. So yeah, I think they're going to start this season pretty poorly. I think they will improve between, say, the month of May and probably the summer break, but because, like I showed, compared to Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, and Alpine, or not Alpine, but Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, teams that I think they'll be racing in 2023, because those teams will have more time in the wind tunnel compared to McLaren, and because McLaren, I think, will start the season slower than those teams, in the championship, they won't be able to beat those teams because they won't be able to outdevelop them like they could have done without these regulations. So yeah, McLaren, unless they're new upgrades that they've been talking about coming at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, unless they make the car like a second a lap quicker, I really don't see how McLaren finish anywhere near where they finished last season. So yeah, McLaren are going to have, without a doubt, a poor season in 2023. And yeah, they've just thrown away all of the, all of the good work, hard work they did in 2019, 20, and 2021 in closing the gap to the front-running teams. And they've seemingly thrown it all away. And it is a real shame, but I think I said this a few months ago. I don't believe McLaren are ever going to be a front-running team because I think they have missed their opportunity that they had probably a couple years ago to really become a front-running team again. And I just don't think they've got, with their personnel, I just don't think they've got what it takes. And I think they are basically now, McLaren, what Williams were between, say, 2005 and 2013. Just a midfield team that is obviously a lot bigger than what their position in the championship will suggest, but they're just a midfield team fighting with teams that, are a lot smaller than them. I think that's what their reality is now going forward. And if I'm Lando Norris, I'm absolutely trying to get my way out of there. But let's get into some stats regarding how they did last season. So in the Constructors, they finished in 5th. Like I said, I don't think they finished there absolutely this season. I think they would... It'd be an incredible season, honestly, if they were to finish there, given how they're going to start this season. In the driver's standings, Lando Norris had a very good 7th place. He's going to do well to get into the top 10 of the championship this season, I think. And then, yes, 9 top 6 finishes, including a podium, and then 24 points finishes for McLaren in 2022. Yeah, those numbers are going to come down quite drastically, I'm afraid. And the teams, like I said, that they are, now going to be competing with are going to be teams like the next one we're going on to, which is the, if my mouse will fucking work and actually scroll down, is the Alfa Romeo team, who, to me, didn't look great at the start of testing, but looked a lot better on the final day, and their pace looked pretty impressive, and they look as though they're as quick as they were at the start of last season. So yeah, I think Alfa Romeo are in for another good F1 season. Will they be fighting with Alpine? I don't think so. I think Alpine will be a little too strong for them, but I think Alfa Romeo have got, certainly for the first half of the season, a good car and a good base to have a good result in the championship. I mean, I know obviously they're being taken over progressively by Audi, and obviously Audi will be taken over fully for 2026, but we still have to remember they are quite a small team in comparison to the others. So yeah, it really is impressive how, what they did last season and how they're starting this season. So full credit to the people at Alfa Romeo for designing another pretty tidy car. And yeah, I think they'll start the season well, but again, just like last season, their Achilles heel will be lack of money to develop the car in the second half of the season, and that will really hurt them. Plus, they'll actually have less time allowed in the wind tunnel this year than they had last season, because of course they finished three positions better in the championship last year compared to 2021. So yeah, Alfa Romeo not going to benefit that much from development in 2023. And I think that will cost them just about in the Constructors' Championship, as I'll show later on. In regards to the drivers, I think Valtteri Bottas has another good season. I think gets quite a few Q3 appearances, some points finishes. For Zhou Guanyu, though, this really, I think, is the year that he has to properly show what he's got. Because if he has another, what I thought was an underwhelming season last season, I really don't get why a lot of people out there thought Zhou last season had this amazing season. It really baffles me. Because he was clearly worse than Bottas was. I mean, maybe in qualifying, it wasn't as bad as what it seemed in the races, but yeah, Zhou was clearly worse than Bottas last season. But yeah, this is really a make or break season because Théo Pourchaire, I'm pretty sure, is in Formula 2 this season, and of course, still with Sauber. And if Théo does win the F2 championship, then I think he will be in the car for next season, unless Zhou has an amazing season and really shows something much greater than what we saw last season. So yeah, this is a make or break year for him. I think he unfortunately won't deliver because I don't think he is quite good enough for Formula 1, is Zhou. I just don't think he can consistently put in good enough performances in Formula 1 with, what is a pretty great field of drivers. I mean, maybe in another era of Formula 1 when the quality of the grid was a lot lower, he would have got on better, but with how great the quality is now, I think he can't. I just don't think he can produce, that consistent great results that really a team like Alfa Romeo would need. And I do believe absolutely that Théo Pourchaire is a better driver than Zhou Guanyu. Certainly, I think has more talent. Whether Théo, gets the job done in Formula 2, we'll see this season. One thing I did want to mention quickly is I think I may have mentioned in testing that tonight in my season preview I was going to do a Formula 2 one as well. I've decided not to do that because I just want to focus on Formula 1, and I also want to separate this season my Formula 2 content from the Formula 1 stuff. But I will do, probably in the build-up to the sprint race watch-along I do for the Formula 2 race this weekend, I probably will do a season preview of sorts, giving my thoughts as to who to look out for, and, my predictions in the championship going into the 2023 F2 season. But yeah, it's going to be a massive year for Zhou. I mean, I hope he delivers. I really hope I'm proven wrong, but I really don't think he's this, great driver secretly that for some reason so many people do. I really do not see what other people are saying here. But let's quickly go on to how they did last season. So yeah, they were 6th in the championship. Really, the aim has to be to finish there again. And Bottas had a great season, I think. Top 10 in the drivers' standings. They had 3 top 6 finishes and 12 points finishes. I think that amount of points finishes is maybe possible this season, but I don't think the amount of top 6 finishes is as possible as it was last year, I'm afraid. But we'll now go on to a team that they are going to be quite big rivals of the Alfa Romeo team during this season, and it is the Haas F1 team, the MoneyGram Haas F1 team, of course, a new title sponsor for them, which is a big helping for this team, because the big reason last year why they started so well and then dropped off so quickly, because of course they lost their title sponsor and they didn't have that sponsorship money to help them develop their car. This season, that won't be as big, hopefully, of an issue. So Haas F1, I think, will have absolutely a better season than what we saw in 2022. Car looks good. I think they're in for definitely for this weekend, a pretty quick weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the top 10 in qualifying, maybe scoring some points. I think that's definitely possible. But for the season, I think, yeah, because of that sponsorship money they now have, they'll be able to develop their car more, and I think that'll keep them at least in the fight for the top 6 of the championship, and they will be certainly in the second half of the season a lot more competitive, where with teams. Oh, sorry, just having some hiccups. With teams like Alpine and Alfa Romeo. So yeah, if you're a Haas F1 fan, I think you're in for a better season for sure. With the 2 drivers, Magnussen and Hülkenberg, I think Magnussen comes out on top because I think Kevin will be too good in qualifying for Nico. Obviously, as well, Nico needs to get back up to speed with F1. I know he's done a couple reserve drive races in the past, but, consistently producing the goods week after week, race after race is a completely different thing to filling in as a reserve driver. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a bit tough in the first half of the season. Second half of the season, it'll improve. But I think as well, one thing that does help is if Hülkenberg does improve a bit in the second half of the year, if he can be consistent and get some good results in the races, I think it gives Haas a better chance in the Constructors' Championship than what they had last year with Mick Schumacher, who was all over the place with his consistency, to get a better finish than what they had last year. Remember last year they finished 8th in the championship. And let's just get on to what they did exactly last year. And yeah, it was 8th in the constructor standings. Magnussen 13th on the driver's side. I think Magnussen really did the best he could with the car last year. They had 2 top 6 finishes and 8 points finishes in 2022. A lot of those points finishes, though, were in the first... they were in the first, 5 races, I think? They had, was it 4 or 3 points finishes? At least half of them in the first 4 or 5 races of last season. It just shows you how big the drop-off was after we got to, say, race 6 or 7 of the season. But, I think this season, with more sponsorship money, will definitely be a better season for them. And quickly, we'll now go on to the Alpha Tauri team, who I didn't think were going to be, that special this season. And things, I guess, are looking better for them this season. They look as though they've probably got a tad quicker car than what we saw last season. The issue is, though, no disrespect to Nick de Vries, who, needs to prove, firstly, whether he is absolutely a super quick driver for Formula 1 and is absolutely good enough for Formula 1. Because we have 2 drivers who need to prove a lot, and they're not stable commodities, I guess you could say, in Formula One. We just don't know if there is potential with this car. I just don't think we know that it will be delivered during the course of 2023. Yuki Tsunoda, just like Zhou Guanyu, has a massive year. If he has another year like he had last season, then I think Tsunoda has a pretty good chance of getting kicked out of the team, because I don't think they're going to put up with him, for too long. There is talk maybe of Red Bull selling the team because of how much it costs, to run the team. But I don't think that's going to be happening, next year or anything. I think that's more likely going to be happening in a couple years, maybe at the earliest. But yeah, I think it's a big year for the drivers. The car, is there to a certain extent. It's got the potential to finish in the points, finish in the top 10 in qualifying, but it's really up to the drivers as to whether the potential is actually delivered upon. And I think because these two drivers will not be quite as reliable as what AlphaTauri / Toro Rosso have had in the past, I think they'll have a similar-ish season to last year, only being helped really by the demise of McLaren. But this is how they did last season. They were 9th in the championship, second worst last year. Their worst finish in the constructors' standings, I think, since 2018 when, they were Toro Rosso, and that was the first year they had the Honda Power Unit. Obviously, Nick De Vries in the driver's standings last year, finishing 21st, only did one race, but it was a 9th place finish. Yeah, pretty great there. And they had one top 6 finish, 10 points finishes, more than Haas had, but it wasn't enough to beat Haas in the championship. So, it's going to be a similar season. Maybe not as many points finishes, but, it's going to be a similar season to last year, where points finishes are few and far between, and if they're going to have a properly successful season, then they're going to have to deliver big when those chances to score points do come around. And finally, before I get into my final predictions for the season, let's go on to the Williams team. Now, Williams have definitely made progress. Their car looks definitely closer / better to the, say, midfield than it looked last year. But because Williams still financially are not in a great place, and I still think they are the slowest team, I still think they finish last in the championship. And until I see different from Logan Sargent, I still think Alex Albon really will be the driver carrying this team. Sargent will be consistently better than Latifi was, but I think Albon, like I said, is the one that carries this team forward. Obviously, James Vowles, the ex-Mercedes strategist, now the team principal of the Williams team. Really hope he does well, but yeah, I think Williams are going to stay at the foot of the championship. Let's see how they did last year with these stats. Obviously, last in the championship last season. Alex Albon 19th on the driver's side. 0 top 6 finishes. You'd expect that for a team finishing last. But they did have 5 points finishes. So, I mean, if they're going to finish any higher than 10th, then if they do get that amount of points finishes this season, it needs to be kind of like with AlphaTauri. If they have those opportunities to finish in the points, they need to make sure it's a bit or a few more points than just, 1 point for 10th or 2 points for 9th. But it's going to be pretty hard for them to accomplish such a thing. But guys, let me now get on to my Drivers and Constructors Championship predictions. Make sure to post yours in the live chat and the comments section down below. And yeah, I'll get into mine right now. So on the driver's side, Max Verstappen wins the championship in my view. Sergio Perez finishes in second. I think Red Bull dominate the season really. In a similar way to really how Mercedes did in 2019, I guess you could say. Lewis Hamilton, I think, finishes in third. I think he'll really come good, Hamilton, with the Mercedes car second half of the season. Charles Leclerc got fourth, only really because I think Ferrari will be probably a bit better compared to Mercedes at the start of the season. But Leclerc, like I showed earlier, I think will win 3 races this season, which really will help him finishing in the top 4. George Russell, I think, finishes in 5th. And then I've got Alonso 6th, ahead of Carlos Sainz in 7th, who I think will have another poor season, really. Lance Stroll will then be in 8th, with Ocon 9th and Gasly in 10th. So, yeah. The rest of the driver standings I've not predicted because it's a lot harder to predict. And really, I think, I personally only care about the top 10. So that's why I've only done the top 10. And now let me show my Constructors' Championship prediction. So Red Bull will be Constructors' Champions. Mercedes will finish in 2nd. And the reason they'll finish in 2nd compared to Ferrari is because they'll have much better race pace when obviously the points are scored and will develop better than Ferrari will over the course of the season. Also, let me just check. And yeah, I've misspelled prediction twice on the top there. I'm so sorry about that for that typo. Yeah, Mercedes will develop better than Ferrari will and will have a much better second half of the season. So that's why I've got them in 2nd. Ferrari 3rd, Aston Martin 4th. Again, Aston Martin, the reason I've got in 4th is because I think they will be behind Ferrari, certainly in the first half of the season. But also I think because Ferrari have a stronger driver lineup, that will help them over Aston Martin. But I think by the end of the season, I think it'll really come down to 20 points at most between Ferrari and Aston Martin. I think Aston Martin could legitimately finish in the top 3 of the championship. I think that is absolutely possible. Alpine, I think, will finish in a solid 5th. Haas F1, 6th place. Yep, I'm going for it. I think they're going to have a good season. I think they have a much better driver lineup than they've had in the last few years. And yeah, I think they will develop their car better this season. And I think they'll be better overall, results-wise, than what we saw in 2022. So yeah, I've got them finishing in 6th. It will be close, though. Them versus Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, and McLaren. Alfa Romeo will finish in 7th. AlphaTauri 8th. McLaren will finish in 9th. The reason I've got them finishing in 9th is because I think they'll start the season probably about 9th quickest. They will improve their car, but then because teams like Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri will be able to outdevelop them because of their extra, wind tunnel time, and because McLaren will probably likely concentrate on the 2024 car early with the new facilities that are coming on board, like the simulator and the wind tunnel, I think. Yeah, I think McLaren will probably finish 9th in the championship, with Williams in 10th. So let me know, guys, in the live chat right now, what is your predictions, your absolute final predictions for the new Formula One season? Of course, I will come back to these at the end of the season to see how we did. We didn't do a season preview last season because of issues that I don't want to. I don't want to invoke in case you never know what could happen. But yeah, I think with my predictions, I think there's a 75-80% chance I'm going to be correct. I don't think I'm going to be massively wrong. I think the teams I'll probably be wrong on is probably Haas F1, maybe McLaren, maybe Aston Martin. Yeah, we'll see. But I think mostly I'll be correct. Anyway, let's read what you guys have to say. Make sure to keep your comments coming. Jim Brown says, I should wait until the testing this Friday to get some clarity on where the teams are. I'm not sure Red Bull are that far in front of Ferrari, and I think at this time Mercedes look like a dark horse. Okay. I mean, at this point, yeah, it is kind of like, my views on who has what type of car performance-wise and who doesn't, I mean, is based on my, I guess, best opinion of the data that we have had from testing. And obviously that isn't the full picture, but yeah. I think most people have got a good idea of what's, the pecking order is looking like going into the first Grand Prix. Greg Martinez says Alonso bring a lot to the team. Absolutely. Darth Lord Raven says Zhou. I also think he can do more. Greg Martinez says Zhou better than Yuki, Stroll, Sargent, and Nico, but that's just me. I think better than Yuki, yeah, you could probably say that. I don't think he's better than Stroll. I think Stroll definitely is better than him. Sargent, yeah, I think Zhou's better. And then Hulkenberg, it's hard to say, obviously, because Hulkenberg hasn't properly been in F1 for, 3 years? 4 years? Bottas will always be a mediocre driver. He doesn't defend properly. I won't say mediocre, but yeah, his racing skills leave a lot to be desired. Nick De Vries better deliver because people were acting like he was a second coming of Christ as a race car driver. I mean, his performance in the Williams at Monza last season was really impressive. Let's not say anything crazy and say it wasn't that great. But yeah, I think he will deliver to a certain extent. I think he'll probably be in the AlphaTauri for next season as well. I don't think it's going to be like a Brendan Hartley situation. But yeah. Rookspurt, good to see you, by the way, mate. Says, I predict for 2023 if a particular track suited Aston or a slightly wounded Red Bull put Alonso and Max racing for position. Absolute fireworks indeed. That would be amazing to see. Greg Martinez says Max, Checo, Alonso, Leclerc, Sainz, and Gorge Melee. I have no idea what that means. Darth Lord Raven, McLaren 9th, really? I mean, if you believe, what a lot of the journalists have been saying about McLaren, and if you've been listening to a lot of what McLaren have come out and said during testing, before testing, after testing, it does sound like they've got a pretty bad car. And yeah, I think they finish. I think they finish in 9th. I mean, if you look at the last 3 or 4 seasons, McLaren have never really started the season in a position and then made 2 or 3 positions up during the season. If you look at 2019, 2020, 2021, and obviously last year. Maybe last year you could say, well, at the start of the season they did improve a lot after the first race, but I think they were always going to do that. Because obviously the first race of last season they were beset with lack of running because of their brake issues. But yeah, I think if they start this season nearly at the back, I think maybe they will make up a position during the season, but it isn't, they're not going to be getting near 5th place or anything like that in the championship. Rook says McLaren have just built and moving into new factory/facilities, so a lot of expenditure and disruption in the build-up to 2023. Yeah, I think all of that stuff is coming online later this year, isn't it? Or maybe it just has. I'm not sure exactly. But I still think, even though, those things are coming and that will help them, I don't think McLaren last season or this season have delivered to the maximum of what they had before, a new simulator and wind tunnel. So what makes us think that they're actually going to deliver fully with a new wind tunnel and simulator? That's the problem. Will F1 Gaming says the whole of Quadrant will come after you now. Probably, but I mean, reality is reality. It's like that Thanos line, isn't it, from Infinity War? Reality is often disappointing. And I think that's what it is going to be the case, sadly, for McLaren and Norris this season. Alonso definitely top 4 this season, says William Finlay. I think that's... I think the reason I'm not quite predicting that is because I just don't know for sure yet, like, where they are at. Because there's still a part of me thinking, have they shown maybe a bit too much of their hand compared to what Ferrari and Mercedes maybe can do? So, yeah, I'm just thinking maybe that's the case. But, like I said, we'll see when the season starts. I think in Bahrain, if Aston Martin are legitimately as quick as Mercedes, maybe even Ferrari in the race, then I think, yeah, game on for the season. But I just think, yeah, I'm not going to quite go to the point of predicting them in the top 4 of the championship or anything. Classic Looney says Mercedes will be faster than Red Bull by the end of the season, and in 2024 Lewis will get his 8th. Well, we'll see, but I think that's going to be pretty difficult to do, given what state Red Bull are in, which is quite a bulletproof state at the minute. They look unbeatable. Blade Rise says on the driver's side, he thinks Verstappen, from Leclerc, Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Alonso, Ocon, Bottas, Norris. And then on the constructor's side, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Haas, McLaren, AlphaTauri, Williams. Rook says the new facilities for McLaren are meant for the reason they are on the back foot currently, but hopefully their development will speed up as the new stuff comes online. It's hard to know exactly why they're on the back foot, though, currently. I mean, the only indication we've had to why they are is Andrea Stella said, I think at the car launch event, that during the, later part of the design of the car, they realised areas where they already could definitely improve or do things better. Again, I'm not sure if maybe the resources in designing the car, I'm not sure how much they were affected by the building of a new wind tunnel and all of that stuff. But yeah, maybe this new upgrade they're talking about is a new car concept. It's hard to say with McLaren. Also, one thing that is very hard to say with McLaren is we don't know exactly why their car is so slow. When I've looked at the car visibly on track, there's nothing clear you can see as to why it's slow. But everyone is saying, and even McLaren, that it's slow. So, yeah, we'll see obviously this weekend. And obviously once we get the data, like sector time data, speed trap data, we'll be able to really get down to, why is the McLaren car so slow, if it is. Would be nice to see Alonso P2 next to Max P1 and Hulkenberg P3. It's my dream podium. Maybe in 2023 craziness will happen. But I think I've been going for nearly 2 hours. I think, guys, I'm probably gonna leave it there because I'm pretty much done with everything I wanted to talk about. That is my full season preview, and we'll see how correct or not correct I am at the end of the season in Abu Dhabi in late November, which is in 9 months from now. Not 9 months from now, sorry. No, it is 9 months from now. Yeah, sorry. I thought it was 11 months from now. Don't know why I thought that. Yeah, make sure, like I said, if you haven't already, let me know in the comments section, what are your last cast in iron predictions for the season on the driver's side and constructor side. Very interested to see what you guys think going into the first Grand Prix of the Formula One season, and of course the season in general. Quickly, let me just update you guys, if you don't know already, what the next 2 pieces of content on the channel are. So I'll be back on Thursday night, same time, 8 p.m. Obviously UK time. Whenever I show these channel schedule things, the timings are always for UK time, just so you know. Bahrain Grand Prix weekend preview will take place on Thursday night. In that preview, I'm going to be talking a lot more in a track-specific sense in regards to the teams. So, yeah, just to update you guys on that, because you may be thinking, well, how is it really going to differ from what I've done, I guess, today and in other streams? But yeah, I am going to do more of a track-specific look of how things may play out for the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. And then the day after, on Friday at 2:45, 15 minutes before Practice 2 starts, I will be doing and starting my Practice 2 watch-along. So make sure to come along to that. Obviously, the Practice 2 session, the most representative practice session of the weekend. And it will give us, I think, a pretty good idea of what's going to happen in the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. So make sure to come along to that. And later on Friday night, I'll be doing at 8 p.m. a qualifying preview stream where we'll go through all of the data from practice, long runs, not long run stuff, the quali run stuff, sector time data, maybe some speed trap stuff, look at upgrades, all of that stuff we'll be getting into in the qualifying preview as well. And of course, on the Saturday, I'll be doing a qualifying watch along and a race watch along on the Sunday as well. So before I go, guys, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this and join us, make sure, for this weekend's Bahrain Grand Prix, the first race of the season. And before everyone goes, make sure, if you have not already, to smash that like button, and don't forget as well to share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget, if you want to keep up to date with the content on this channel, to either join our Discord server, link below in the description, for more content like this. And you can even follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. It is on Twitter. And what do you call it? If you want to get a good rundown of just what happened in pre-season testing and the real key data, there is a link below in the chat to my pre-season testing full review I did on Sunday night, where I got into the long run data from all the teams, also the quali runs, and did some tire adjusted stuff to really try and knuckle down to what is it looking like, the performance difference between all the teams going into 2023. So again, if you want to get a good idea of how it's looking going into at least this weekend's Grand Prix in Bahrain, then make sure to go and check out that stream that took place on Sunday night, about an hour and a half long, I think. Yeah, make sure to go and check that out. But guys, until Thursday night for my weekend preview for the first race of the season, the Bahrain Grand Prix of 2023, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.